For those of you who I haven't met before, my name is Michael Goldberg, and I'm the relatively new executive director of our Veale Institute for Entrepreneurship at Case, which we really kicked off earlier this year. I also am an associate professor at Weatherhead, where I teach courses on entrepreneurship. And it's really a pleasure to welcome the panel today. Mada and I have not met, but the other two panelists I know well. Dan Moore has been a friend and mentor for many years. And Zac Ponsky I've known since he was a baby, because we are first cousins. So I truly have known Zac his whole life, and glad to see Aunt Jackie and Uncle Jeffrey joining us as well. So this is a family affair today. I'm going to turn it over to Brad Goldstrom, who is a recent grad. Congratulations, Brad, of our undergraduate school, the virtual graduation, and I know is continuing on as a master's student in biomedical engineering. For all of these speaker series, we have them student moderator, which is great. And I know, Brad, you had a chance to touch base with our panelists before. So Brad will kind of run the show, and we really do encourage your questions. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand, your virtual hand, your real hand. You can put a question in the chat, and Brad will make sure that we integrate them. So with that, Brad, let me turn it over to you, and thank you for moderating.
Of course. So I want to thank everyone for joining. My name is Brad Goldstrom, and as Dr. Goldberg said, I just graduated from undergrad at Case and am now pursuing a master's degree in biomedical engineering, again at Case. I want to start out by thanking Zac, Dan, and Mada for taking the time to sit down and speak with us, especially about something as important as the ventilator shortage worldwide and in America right now during the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, just so you guys know, feel free to ask questions in the chat, and I'll probably call on you guys to, you can ask the question yourself. If not, I can just ask it for you. So yeah, feel free to put questions in the chat. I want to start out basically by asking Zac, Dan, and Mada to sort of give an introduction to their newly founded company and what they are trying to achieve with this new venture.
Zac, would you like to, or shall I do it?
Go ahead.
Well, this started out as a very important response to what appeared to be an absolute panic need for more ventilators to keep people alive. And Zac saw this as being an important idea, and suggested to me that we maybe do something to see if we can get something started here. And he raised some money with the Cleveland Foundation, and we were off and running. I think that the thing that is most interesting about this project, and so what we did is we made ventilators, and we got started. It took us about 6 weeks roughly to get this thing going, and Zac, Mada, and myself, and there's some guys from my team were all working on it together. But it was what I think is most interesting about this project is it's a wonderful fast forward of a typical startup deal, where it starts with the good deals. I generally find start with an incredible need, a very well defined unmet need, and then they go through the financing, which Zac handled, and then the development of a product, which Mada was key to, and with a group of engineers who were that worked with various companies that I have that were more or less, the companies had more or less stopped doing what they're doing because the industry had stopped. And so we got this product started and developed a product that was very good. The need was extreme, very clearly defined. We all read about it. But the need was really not as much as we thought it was. I think there was a lot of, the ventilators are now, a month later, 6 weeks later, are now readily available in the United States. The cities that were most desperate for ventilators now are loaning them to other cities. So it was a pell-mell rush, but I think what it showed, at first it showed how wonderful it is when a bunch of people work together. And in this case, Mada with University Hospital, very aggressive on this thing, did not stop at anything. Zac was on top of it like a wet shirt. And then the various engineers that we had were working on it, really not so much to make money, but to get it done. And for philanthropic reasons, you know, we felt the world needed ventilators. So that's sort of a quick summary. We took 1 week to develop 7 products and pick one out at the end. 1 week to prove the product. Another week to get FDA approval, and now the product is really, you know, it's an emergency ventilator. It doesn't have all the features that a full-scale ventilator would have. So it's really the need didn't really emerge in the United States, and we're finding in other markets it's a difficult thing to market.
Thanks, Dan. I think it's interesting you mentioned how it only took about 6 weeks and how there's sort of a perceived need in America. I mean, there must be a greater need worldwide still, but it seems like the COVID-19 pandemic is sort of changing the traditional approach to entrepreneurship, because normally healthcare startups don't take 6 weeks to come together, and you need to like flesh out that need for a really long time. So it seems like it's really changing.
But I think one of the mistakes made here is that the need seemed to be obvious to all of us, but an unmet need is only a critical thing when a lot of people don't know about it. Right now, in another month, there'll be 2 times the number of ventilators we need for the United States. So there's absolutely no demand for ventilators in the United States. And so the question is, what is it in foreign markets? And what should the redefined ventilator be? Should it be, and Mada, maybe you should talk to what ventilators mean and what changes could be made and where the opportunities might be in the ventilator field.
Right, so initially started working on this, the problem as we defined it was that there eventually would be enough ventilators. We have enough folks who produce ventilators across the country, but we were worried that at the time of the projected surge, before the stay-at-home orders were fully enforced, we were worried that there would be a peak during which there would not be enough ventilators. And the experience that I'm sure you're all aware of in New York City, something similar to that nature did happen, where there were not enough ventilators in a select few hospitals. And so that was our fear. And we operated on that basis. Now, as the stay-at-home order took effect and the curve flattened, that need went down. And so the purpose of our ventilator was to serve that very small time frame in the US during which there was going to be a surge, but not enough sophisticated ventilators. So fortunately for us and for all the patients, the stay-at-home order flattened the curve. And so that initial need that we were operating on changed. And now we're looking at other countries who perhaps just might not be able to afford more sophisticated ventilators in the long run. This particular ventilator does serve the need of a very specific subset of patients, such that the more sophisticated ventilators could be used for COVID patients. So let's say there's a country that does not have a high budget. They could purchase these ventilators, use them for routine post-operative care, and then reserve their very sophisticated ventilators for their COVID patients.
Thank you, Mada. And thanks, Dan. I think you guys provided a pretty solid introduction to what Second Breath is trying to achieve. Do you guys think you could each give a little bit of background, your career background and educational background, and then perhaps what led each of you to come together?
Well, why don't I start with the last question that Zac brought us all together. Zac has a nose for an unmet need and has a lot of contacts to put stuff together. So Zac is the one that put it together. I'm just basically a serial entrepreneur. I run a company called Dan T. Moore Company, and we have 17 operating companies. We try to start one every year, and we try to buy one every year. We typically buy small distressed companies I'm a Clevelander by birth. I have an MBA degree and a graduate degree and MBA degree. And I've just been working now. I'm just been working on starting stuff for years. Mada's background is much more interesting than mine.
I'm not sure about that. I'm also a Clevelander. I went to medical school at Wright State University, and I trained here in Cleveland at the Cleveland Clinic for 5 years. I did anesthesia and critical care, which put this COVID crisis kind of right up my alley. And I know Zac through his brother, so we worked together, kind of came together on that front. Currently, I work at university hospitals. I'm the program director for the training program and also an intensivist and anesthesiologist.
Hello, I'm Zac, also from Cleveland. I would not call myself an entrepreneur. I would not call myself somebody who has any experience in the ventilator space at all. But what I do think is so interesting for this particular audience that we're speaking to is this isn't really about a ventilator. This is about finding a need and filling it, which is a basis of our nonprofit MedWorks. And we really, I don't like reading business plans. I don't like writing business plans, but I like trying to execute on them. And this was really a case of, ready, fire, aim type of program that we put together. This was not something that we sat down and created a very well thought out business plan. We didn't really know who the buyer was. We didn't know what the product would end up looking like. We didn't know how it would compare to our competitors. And we really didn't care. We went into this with the greater cause of the mission. And that's what led us day by day down a path without knowing if these would get built, if these would get effectively approved by the FDA, if there would even be a need by the time we were done. But our goal really was, how do we bring together experts, the people that really have the clinical expertise, the business expertise, and deliver on an outcome that we could all feel proud about, that we gave our full effort for. And that's what we did. We really found the best of the best people. And we communicated many times a day with each other in a very healthy dynamic at a time where you couldn't have typical meetings. And it was very challenging to learn the new, how we're going to communicate virtually while we're building a new business. And I think, where this came from really was, our nonprofit MedWorks has 3,500 volunteer medical professionals around Northeast Ohio. And the discussion behind the scenes from the docs and the nurses and the clinicians was, we have a real need here. We can see what's happening on the news. There's got to be a way we can pull enough good, smart people together to solve this problem. And that's what we did, in a matter of 3 weeks. What's interesting is 3 weeks sounds like a very fast timeline to get up, come up with an idea, build the product, get it FDA approved, and be ready for sales. But really, we were a week too late as from a business standpoint. Mada, Dan, and I were on the phone with the health commissioner of New York, who's sitting next to Como in the press conferences and calling us after. That's how close we were to the center of gravity. And he was ready. I mean, he was ready to pull the trigger and place a request for, hundreds and hundreds of these things. He just needed to have that FDA sign off. And it took us a week longer to get that FDA sign off. And, a business plan would have never told us that we would have missed that peak by just 5 days. And it's amazing how fast the momentum shifts in a situation like that. I still can't believe how fast things shifted from, talking to the health commissioner of New York of his need, and then 5 days later, they're starting to see the pullback. They're starting to see the numbers stabilize a little bit. And it was just within, a couple days there that they that dire desire to get those units backed off that fast. And that's when we started refocusing our efforts on other places that need these, including international. And we're still in discussions with our friends in Brazil, who are right now, unfortunately, in a very, very bad situation. I just got an email from one of our contacts there yesterday, and they're in distress. And but as Dan said, there's a lot of units that were built that are now going to be able to be redirected to places like Brazil, and maybe Dan's product will as well. But I also think now that you get into this next phase is, what did we create and what are other uses for it? And those are some of the things that we're starting to ask ourselves. It's time to refocus that business plan, to think about how this could be used inside an ambulance for long patient transports, or things where they normally would not justify buying a $50,000 or $30,000 ventilator, but they could use a very basic, simple breathing machine to relieve somebody from having to squeeze a basic ambu bag for 8 hours. And those are the kind of things that I think that Dan's team is really looking at, to see how things could be reimagined and repurposed from what we learned. So this is just because they didn't get used. Thank God. We said from the beginning, Dan and Mada and I says, our biggest hope is that these never get used. And then we won that one.
Adding to that a little bit, the ambulance equipment is one idea, but there are other ideas as well. I think the deeper you look into this whole idea of using a ventilator, the more you find out bad things about that ventilation. One is you end up the patient is anesthetized partly, suffers from delirium after usually a week or so in the delirium. In the case of New York, and the success rate was 30% in some cases, and 20 to 30%. The rest of the people died. So the ventilator may not be the perfect solution for this, and so I think we're going to be looking, with Mada's help, we're going to be looking at a different approach to ventilating a patient. And I think this is typical of what happens. Like, I remember when we founded a helmet company to make ski helmets, a long time ago, and it morphed into being a military helmet. This happens a lot, and I think in this case, as you learn more about what you're doing, you can begin to refine and further refine and define and further focus a project down into something that is in fact marketable. So I don't think the ventilator market for us is anywhere near dead, but I think what we're going to be doing is finding better solutions so that we can get intellectual property.
Well, thanks to each of you for that. I think it's pretty interesting that a goal of yours is to make your product not useful. It's just kind of like interesting that would be a thing in the COVID-19 pandemic. Do you guys think that you could speak to what is behind the technology and what the key value proposition between second breaths ventilator would be compared to maybe others right now that are producing similar things?
Want me to take a shot at that, Mada, or would you like to?
However you prefer. I can start and then you can pick up.
Okay, sure.
So I think the key thing here, Brad, is that right now we're in a pandemic situation, which is not typical, obviously, over the course of time, right? So if every hospital were to spend its capital purchasing a highly sophisticated ventilator, when the pandemic resolves, they would have spent so much money on equipment that they will not be using in the long run. They just needed this very sophisticated technology for a very short period of time. So what we were hoping to do was provide a product that was able to fill a need. Even it might not do everything under the sun, right? But it'll help us take care of a very specific subset of patients. And by doing that, it'll save hospitals capital and then also meet the desired need for that specific group of patients. So it's not very economical, I think, to buy those very sophisticated higher end ventilators on a very large scale for any hospital system. So I think that's what keeps it unique currently at the moment, one of those features. And I'll pass it on to Dan for more detail.
Well, ours was definitely an emergency ventilator. And for if you have a fancy ventilator, you probably want to use that one. But I think what jumps out at me, and it happens all the time, I think you can see things wrong with the way the whole thing is being done now. And I think that's where it's exciting. So I think our ventilator could have an application in underdeveloped countries, depending on how this thing goes. We'll need probably 6 weeks to scale it. We have 36 ventilators in stock, and we need 6 weeks to probably scale up to make 100 or 150 every week. But I think the better approach is a more stable business would be to learn more about how we can do this better. And one of the ways of doing this is to develop a way to expand your chest, and so you can suck air in rather than forcing air down your throat. And I think that's one area that I'd like to look at carefully, and to try to develop something that is in the $6,000 range that would do that, where you wouldn't have to have something on your mouth. You wouldn't have a trach tube stuck down your throat, where it would be something that goes over your chest. And there's such a machine now, but there's some fatal flaws with how there's some improvements that could be made on it.
Thank you, Dan. We have a question in the Zoom chat from JT Tan. JT, if you want to ask that question, you can go ahead.
Hi, yeah, sorry, I'm just jumping on here. Yeah, I had a question. So this is incredible what you guys have done. I totally agree with what Zach, you just described. I'm working on a project very similar called the Prevent Project, personal fume hoods applied to post-acute or less controlled situations to provide that additional measure of control. One of the things that's fascinating is the complexity around the ventilator problem. This is probably a class 3 medical device. Just love to hear, the hurdles around how do you actually get to something adoptable here, given that, just defining a regulatory path is difficult. So defining it, actually clearing it in that time scale that you guys went through, as well as funding all that work to make it happen. I mean, there's some clear differences between innovating with a medical device versus something completely unregulated. So love to hear that journey. Thanks. Appreciate it.
I think the funding was through Zach's ability to be able to see how this could be financed. And the Cleveland Foundation, of course, Ron Richard saw the value in being able to do this. And I think that was terrific. One of the hardest things was getting the supply chain put together when you have a pandemic situation and you can't meet with people. We needed various sensors and all sorts of things to go into this thing, and that was probably the hardest part, because there was no point in going down any path where the components weren't available now.
I'll just add to that. I think one of the interesting things during the approval process was New York just wanted to know that it had been tried on a patient. The word FDA approval didn't come up once. It was, has it been put on a patient? and we had an ICU intensivist Dr. Lou Preem, who used to practice here in Cleveland, in a hospital in New York, who was ready to put it on a patient. And the health department in New York called him and said, can you get it on a patient tonight? And he said, well, I'm not on call tonight, but I guess I could try to go in anyway and put it on a patient. He goes, if you can put it on a patient, I want those ventilators in New York City just by Friday. And he was ready to do it, and it got locked up with the hospital administration and legal department because it wasn't on an IRB yet. So it was just interesting to see, in the process of those that were willing to take the risk without FDA approval. And that we had so many people contacting us at the beginning, sending us documents. It was too long for me to read, but documents of everything you got to go through for the FDA and why this is never going to happen. And really, those that needed it didn't care about FDA. They just wanted to know that it worked on a human. And as we got further into it, Dan's team really did an incredible job, on a parallel process. We had a call with Senator Portman and his influence, as well as some others, and Dan's team really dotting the I's, crossing the T's to go through the process to get the FDA approval, which we finally did a week later.
So JT, just to kind of summarize, I'm a medical doctor, so what I know about entrepreneurship is not much. But what I would say, kind of the key things that I learned going along the way, are step one, kind of Zac's role in being a catalyst and pulling the right people together, I think is a very key step. In addition to securing funding, I think that's super important, but I think also getting the right people who are motivated and willing to invest unrelenting. So Dan and his team of engineers were just on the job 24/7. I was the same way because I definitely saw what this pandemic could have been from a medical angle, and I was the same. So I think that catalyst role in picking the right people is super important. I think the next most important thing too is really believing the product that you're working on. And I don't mean this in a kind of a Disney sort of way, but I truly mean it. That's what motivates people to put energy that's in above and beyond. So when I first went down to help them, I paid one visit to the plant. I wasn't really sure how much help they needed or what they needed. But then as we kind of started working together as a team and all really saw the common need and saw what the pandemic could have been, that motivated us to really work very hard. So making sure that all the involved team members see the end game, see the vision, see where you're trying to go and really believe in it, I think does make a huge difference. I think the third thing that I learned that was kind of a key step is also picking a product that is within your reach in the time frame that you want. So my understanding of ventilators, just because of my medical field, is pretty deep, but the features that I picked were rather simple. And I understood that what we were trying to achieve was something that we were able to make in a scalable way and that was able to fill a very specific time frame, at least within the US, and maybe a broader time frame abroad. And so we agreed as a team that what we wanted was the minimum set of features that would allow us to provide safe patient care. So I wasn't trying to ask them to put an Arduino on this thing. Do you know what I mean? That's not where we were going. So just knowing that sometimes fancier isn't better. It's just literally putting in enough energy to pull you out of the crisis that you're in right at the moment. So I think the catalyst step, getting the right people in, making sure that those people see the vision and where they're going, making sure that the goal is ambitious yet within reach for that time frame so that the team continues to stay motivated. I think those were all very key features. And those were the three main things that I learned kind of along mapping this process. Definitely learning about emergency FDA approval was very key. I think that if the situation were to repeat itself, I'd be thinking about that on day one, because it's very hard, even though it's a pandemic situation, to circumvent such a big regulatory body, that if we were to relive this experience, I would have probably asked Dan about it the day I showed up to the plant and met him for the first time. And I would have started planning for that in addition to everything else we were doing. So hopefully I was able to make this intricate experience a little bit nice and kind of summarize my key learning points for you guys.
Oh, that's excellent. I was wondering, a follow-up question. You mentioned the such importance, both of you guys, on the right team members. Could you mention, especially around this medical innovation, could you, comment around, I almost feel like I'm getting everybody but a regulatory person to that point about what you're talking about, knowing that goalpost, and that it's such a unclear goalpost, right? I mean, it seems short, they say, oh yeah, there's a framework, you just go through the rubric. But then you have to find all of these different analogs and, and there's this, and that's just identifying a path, much less actually going down it, right? And checking those boxes so that, things are all not only convincing for FDA, but potentially any of these people, these early adopters, sure, the high need, I think can drive that conversation, but even they're going to be concerned about liability at some point. So how do you, how to approach that? But one at a time, love to hear the comment on team and the right members and the people.
I'd like to comment on that. I think it's very rare to find someone in the medical community like Mada. I mean, Mada has the persistence of a badger. I mean, absolutely unstoppable. I mean, she will get things done. She's got a passion, which I think, to me, that's critical. And most doctors don't have that kind of passion about newness. They want to serve the patient, yes, but they're not necessarily, newness isn't necessarily what they're trying to do. They're conservative, but they're not aggressive. And Mada, outside of her field, showed an enormous amount of aggression going after this stuff. So she was a tough customer. I'd hate to be on the other side from her on a deal.
Why, thank you, Dan. That's a big compliment coming from such a big CEO, and I'm just starting out in my career here. But what I will say is I think the difference, and I do agree with Dan, that generally in our field, we like to go down a path that's been taken before, just because there's a lot that's at risk in terms of patient lives. But I think what changes the playing field in a pandemic situation, which is similar to any other crisis that people might face in the market, is the traditional road definitely works on a normal day. But when any person is in a crisis situation, maybe a physician in a pandemic or any other business person within their own realm, it becomes time kind of what risk and benefit in medicine. So is it time to get rid? And if I make a risky move, am I going to benefit more in the long run? And in my particular situation, I sensed danger in the way that this pandemic was on the outset. And I knew that if we took the path commonly taken, that the result was not going to be good for our patients. And it was time to get out there and take a risk. And if I was going to take the risk, I was going to be all in. It wasn't going to be halfway, because halfway doesn't get you anything, right? You got to either be all in and really pursue your target all the way because you believe in it, or pick another target, right? And so that's, I think, what really pushed my kind of aggression. I think by nature, I'm a very persistent person, but I also decided that it was time for a risk.
So who were those real key people that you really needed to pull together in order, that you felt, and maybe even informed by retrospect, what would you recommend now, right, as those key people and key expertises?
So what I'll tell you, I think was very, very key was getting in, evidently in creating a medical product, it's good to have somebody who works with patients, right, to kind of help define the patient needs, which was my role. But I think also Dan's team, I think Dan himself is very fascinated by innovation and by new things. And he put in, while we did have some funding, he put in a lot of his own capital behind this, right, because he believed in it, he was interested. And he put his team there too, right? And his team members, the engineers, are just so excited by new products. They're also very hard workers. They believe in him and they want to please him. So I think the key thing is having somebody who can define the product, which in this case was mostly directed by myself. I think it was having folks who were very excited about the implementation and who also believed in the person that was leading them. I mean, I saw this day in and day out with these engineers, they really did believe in Dan. And they always, he has the craziest ideas and they work out. I just don't get how that's the case every time, right? So they believed in him, even though they didn't see necessarily where he was taking them at every moment. They wanted to please him. They believed in him and they put in that energy. And I think that was very key too. And they were also capable individuals. So I think, those are the key team members: a good leader, which was Dan, a good catalyst, which was Zac, and somebody who could define the problem, and then people who could implement it, right? So knowing, where you were going and also how you were going to get there. Zac, maybe you can speak more to that too, since that was a big part of what you did.
No, I think that's great. I think we must recognize a key group here that we haven't talked about, which was we had a product that we needed to get data on. And only in Mada's way, sneaking through, places that we maybe shouldn't have been to get this thing tested. And I'll never forget the phone call, Mada, when you called me and said, we know that Akron General has this machine that we need to do a certain test that the FDA was looking for, and they're not answering the phone. And you said to me, you know what, I'm just going to walk in there and walk right up to the laboratory and plea with the person who's running the lab to let me in to hook this device up to her machine. And sure enough, it worked. And that's where we got our final testing results from, because, you convinced them of your passion of the project on the spot without an appointment. And for whatever reason, they let you make it happen. So it's that type of all in, never quit mentality that you had that I think really reflects on how this really came together.
I think there's one other item that we should probably mention in terms of how you pull a deal like this together. We had 8 engineers that were more or less, most of them were tied up with automobile-related businesses that I have, and they were all filled different sections. Like we had one person who was very good at design, and he worked through 7 designs in a week. And we had a person with him that was very good at chemistry and also good at physics, and he was very involved. And then we had a financial guy who was good at sort of writing stuff up and dealing with the FDA approval. And then we had a person who was good at converting a design into a CAD model, and then the CAD model into something you could actually manufacture. And then a production person who could bring the people in and run it. So there's a team, we have a team of people that are used to starting one company a year. And they're good at this, and they work together, and they don't get conflicted with one another. They're terrific team players. And it's been assembled over a period of years. And there's no one older than 35 that I can think of. Well, maybe 1 or 2 older than 35, but generally they're a lot of them are in their 20s and early 30s. So that dynamic team is really critical, I think, in the project.
One last thing I want to add is I think the air of environment is really important too. And I see this in Dan a lot. There was a lot of positivity at all times, even though the challenges were really high. And so I think it's easy for people to get bogged down when they walk into a roadblock and feel like that's holding them back. But having this mentality of there's always a solution to every problem. We just need to think harder. We need to think differently. We need to pursue it together. I think that was very big. It's very apparent in Dan's leadership style, and it was immediately apparent to me too. Anytime I struggled with the testing, which happened multiple times in multiple sites, I immediately picked up the phone and called Zac, and I said, Zac, how can I think about this differently? Where are we, I'm stuck. What do I do here? And I knew that he was off site and his brain was cool, and he guided me through a lot of the obstacles at a distance, right? But somehow there was always positivity, and there was always the ability to rely on a team member in a time of crisis. And those are really big.
Thanks to the panelists. Seems to be a lot of love going around between you guys. And all joking aside, it does just illuminate how important it is to pick the right people. We have a question from Akash. Akash, do you want to unmute yourself and ask that?
Hi, so my question is when the COVID-19 pandemic hopefully comes to an end in the near future, how do you imagine the target audience of the ventilator to change or adapt to the times?
I think the ventilator market in the United States is completely saturated, and for the pressure ventilation, I think that horse is left. I think the future is going to be in something different, it's something a little better, and I think this concept of negative ventilation, where your chest is pulled out and you fill your lungs to essentially putting a vacuum on your chest. I think that is a kind of an interesting idea where we could compete. There's no point in us competing with the restaurants and some of these big companies that are working in ventilators, particularly when there are twice as many ventilators in this country as we need, or there will be by the end of July. So yeah, we have to think of something new. We're constantly thinking of things new. And my guess is that we have a 50-50 chance of coming up with a new idea. And there's enough bad things about pressure ventilation where I think it'll create some interest. Like, for example, maybe if you had negative pressure ventilation, you could put someone on a ventilator earlier and just kind of to fill their lungs, to assist in filling their lungs. Now, I don't know what the answer to all these things are, but I'm sure that Mada is going to be a willing participant in trying to figure out, what some of the new ideas could be in ventilation. So we're going to continue doing it. The market won't be the United States probably, except for the ambulance ventilators. It'll probably be somewhere, it'll probably be the non-governmental organizations, the NGOs in foreign countries, and where the epidemic will spike up in various spots.
Thank you, Dan. I think we have time for about one more question. We'll see, maybe we'll have time after that, but we have a question in the chat that I'm going to try and wrap into a couple other themes. Do you guys think you could speak to the biotech and healthcare network in Northeast Ohio and how that has aided your development of this company? Well,
it's very deep here. But what is more important is having enthusiastic participants like Mada. You can have all these hospitals, and everyone can be bickering about who owns the IP and all of that. But I think the important thing is the energy to push forward. Cleveland is a fabulous area for that. I mean, with University Hospital, with the clinic, with Case, with Metro, with the VA. I mean, we've got a real powerhouse here. And people say you can't finance a deal in Cleveland. Financing a deal is a worldwide project. It doesn't have to do with Cleveland. So we've got the energy in Cleveland, and we've got tough, young, smart people like Mada that can make this thing work. And that's what we ought to take advantage of. Ferret out the unmet need, the thing that isn't working, the thing that really makes sense. That if you look at it, you look at it carefully, there's an economic model, there's an IP model, and there's a clinical model, all of which work together. We have it here, and we should never be ashamed of what we miss in Cleveland. We have it. We have the whole thing. We have people like Michael that are encouraging entrepreneurship. Very important. I mean, teaching people like Mada to be entrepreneurs, not just to be doctors. very important. Got to get to work, Michael.
Thank you, Dan. I think we should have time for one more question. This would be relevant for some of our students who are preparing to go to med school and be doctors. Mada, how do you think you've been able to balance your career as a physician and now going into entrepreneurship?
I don't know that I would say I'm fully there yet, but I think in this particular situation, it really was an exception because all of us intensivists were working 24/7, and there really wasn't much of a balance. We had to really prepare our hospitals for the worst. But I think in general, the question of balance is always one. Everything comes at a cost, and you can make everything work according to your priorities. So for instance, many of our doctors work either 0.8 of full-time, so they get a day off a week, or they work 0.6. They carve out 1 or 2 days either for research or other endeavors. And there are various hiring tracks with chair people for that. So let's say I were to have a change of heart today and decided to do entrepreneurship half-time, I would still be able to do that. So there's definitely a lot of different infrastructures that permit people to pursue outside interests along with being a physician. So that's definitely a possibility for all the folks out there. Now, my personal recommendation, since we're on the subject, is for the first 3, 4, 5 years, really put all of your heart and soul into medicine. It is not an easy science and art to master. And to provide good patient care, there needs to be an early career dedicated phase where you're just really at the bedside doing everything those patients need. And once that expertise and repertoire is there, it'll not only make us better physicians, but it'll also inform our innovation because, like Dan said, we'll understand the need a lot better.
Thanks, Mada. I think that it's pretty helpful for any of our pre-med students who are also interested in entrepreneurship. So I think we are going to wrap things up now. I'll give you guys the chance to quickly give any other comments that you might want to, anything else that we might be missing here. Then we're going to throw it back to Dr. Goldberg.
I guess the only thing I would say is that the new entrepreneurship starts right now, trying to develop what else we can do with what we've learned over the past 6 weeks.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dan, Zach, and Mada. I think this has been really informative. Now we're going to throw it back to Dr. Goldberg.
Great. Thanks, Brad, for moderating. It's great to have students play this role. Takes all the pressure off me doing the work and asking Zach, Mada, and Dan hard questions. And JT and Akash and others, thank you for your questions. This is a great session. I mean, to have the entrepreneurial catalyst and Zach, and kind of seasoned entrepreneur and Dan, and physician leader dabbling in entrepreneurship in Mada. I mean, this is an amazing story that happened right here in Cleveland. And obviously, because I knew a number of the folks involved with this, I had some insight in what's going on. But I love the update. I mean, and I think, as you all shared today, this is a continuing story. And, we talk a lot in our work at Case and working with entrepreneurs about product market fit and value proposition and business planning. And, Zach, I think you said it well. I mean, this was a case where there wasn't time to do, the traditional customer discovery and business planning, and you're on the phone with New York. So, I mean, there's amazing lessons that are here. And Dan, because I know you're an HBS grad, there's probably an HBS case study to be written of this at some point in the future as this thing plays out. So thank you for sharing. Just a couple of quick announcements before I let everybody go, because this is part of a speaker series. And again, many of you have been part of other sessions that we've had here. We're going to be back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., so a little bit of an earlier start. We've got Benjamin Fernandez and Bernice Fernandez, that actually are 2 entrepreneurs based in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, talking about COVID-19 and the impact on the entrepreneurship community in Tanzania. And the moderator is going to be Ivy Petzinger, who is a Case chemical engineering alum who was doing Peace Corps volunteer in Tanzania and just recently got evacuated back out. So she'll be leading that discussion. And then at 1 o'clock tomorrow, we have Rachel Paul, who is the founder of Rachel Paul Nutrition, to talk about her business at 1 p.m. tomorrow. And then on Thursday, another former Clevelander, Sarah Morgenstern, who is from the area, from Shaker, who's been working after she left McKinsey's, worked for the Omidyar network. So Pierre Omidyar is one of the founders of eBay and started an impact investing fund. And Sarah's going to share her work before. So that'll be on Thursday at 1 o'clock. So again, Brad, thank you for moderating. Dan, Zach, and Mada, great to see you. And thanks for doing this. And have a great day, everybody.